Our redraft and dynasty lineups are probably well formed by this stage of the weekend, so it's time to start thinking about DFS and hopefully winning some cash money. Ed and I are going to go through a whistle-stop tour of the weekend slate and picks you might like to make. And we're going to start with our top game lines, aren't we, Ed? Now, the scores up on the screen, the price on the screen, rather, are for Fantasy Gameday, who are the DFS offering we have over here in the UK. For our American viewers, we've got the DraftKings prices up as well. We've just been speaking before we start to record. You look at where the top score game line projected is going to be, and it's a bit surprising to see that it's the Browns and the Bengals. But then, as you said, Ed, the Bengals defense is so bad. It's probably going to be the case for the Bengals a lot of weeks, isn't it?
Indeed. The Bengals, you look at the weapons there, it doesn't matter which defense they're up against, they're going to look to get big points. And until we see otherwise, we've got to assume the Bengals defense is still absolute toilet. So the Browns, as poor as they're projected to be, should make hay against a poor defense.
The phrase that's often used is looking for the game climate that is kind of conducive to points, isn't it? And this is a game climate where the could be very passive. It could be lots of points flying around. We're going to talk about stacks on the show. For any of you who are tuning in for the first time, stack is basically where you have a couple of players from the same, sometimes three. Because basically, if Joe Burrow throws a touchdown pass to Jamar Chase, you've got the QB touchdown points and the wide receiver touchdown points. In very much a small summary, that is what stack is. Now, obviously, Burrow and Chase is the stack we would all like to have every single week. And no surprise, this week it projects to be the highest scoring combination. But Burrow and Higgins projects to be the second highest scoring stack this week. So, saving there, it's worth looking at, I think, going Burrow Higgins. To be fair, building the rest of your roster, if you've got Burrow and Chase, is quite tricky. And obviously, we're not giving you full lineups here. We're giving you a little bit of that sample. So that's something to consider in there. Chase Brown's always a nice pick in any DFS lineup. And there's a player who's a bit cheaper than him and a couple around him that just appeal to me a little bit more with a potentially higher ceiling. So, although I wouldn't object to putting Chase Brown in your lineups, he's not for me this week.
He's expensive, Chase Brown, isn't he? I think
he is, yeah.
They're kind of quite cannily assuming he'll be involved in the receiving game as well. So, Burrow and Chase as a stack is always difficult because it's going to be blooming expensive. And like you say, it leaves you fewer options elsewhere, but you're more than likely to be rewarded.
It is that tricky, though, isn't it? Looking the other side. So often if you're stacking one side, you'll look for, I don't know if it's the proper term, but I call that kind of like that bring back on the other side of who you're going to get your points from the other side. Are Flacco and Njoku the stack we want this week? You could do it. you could do it if you wanted to. And Njoku is the fifth most expensive tight end this week on the slate and projects to have the fourth most points amongst tight ends. So I think that's probably a reasonable value. And if he snags a tight end, which there's a fair chance of, let's be honest, he could repay nicely on that value. I don't hate Jerry Jeudy at 5,400. I'm not sure I like Cleveland enough this week to plug him in. And he's around other players I think I like more. But I think there's a case potentially to be made for Jerry Jeudy in there. And Jerome Ford. Yeah, there's a way once again, if you're looking for a cheaper running back, that price isn't too bad, but I don't know. It could go on to. We're on the back of us saying we didn't think Javonte Williams was going to do anything last night, and he did loads. So there's a route to that working as well. Any more judgments on Bengals Browns before we move on, Ed?
No, just remember how bad the Bengals defense is. I was about to say the pass defense is bad, but I think the rush defense is even worse. So, I'm hoping that they'll prove me wrong and dazzle on Sunday, but I'm not hopeful.
Looking at the next game, so there's a couple of games around this area of the line. So 47.5 for Bucks and Falcons. Could have also looked at Lions Packers, but this is the one that appealed most for me to look at in this format for a couple of reasons. Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans project to be the fourth highest scoring stack this week. And there is definitely going to be some appeal there. And I imagine that will crop up in a number of places. Amazing when we think we were probably 6-7 weeks in last year till people properly got in on Baker Mayfield for DFS, really. Egbuka is an amazing price. I'm going to wax lyrical about that a little bit later in this show. I'm sure Bucky Irving will feature in a lot of lineups, but for me, there are a few running backs I just like the value of more for building a rounded roster. Once again, there is a case for Bucky. I'm sure some people consider putting Bucky Irving in as their captain on Fantasy Gameday this week. He's just, I don't know. I don't think he's for me. And they say there's another player I'm more interested in that I've already hinted at. Otten and White aren't in consideration for me, so I'm not really going to talk about them. Anything you got to say on the book side of that matchup, Ed?
No, I'm not going to steal your Ibuka thunder. And Baker is at a price where he's tempting, I think, because I expect him to continue where he left off last season, and which is put up big yards. So he is a very tempting option. But I'd be looking to stack him with someone cheaper than Mike Evans.
I want to work bottom to top for the Falcons. Bijan, 8,000. Yes, I think he's the second most expensive player this week. That doesn't mean you don't get the player if they're the most expensive player. It just means you've got to think a bit more crafty elsewhere. Bijan is a fine pick for your captain as well. I think this week, and I think I'll probably have a lineup or two where that is the case. Darnell Mooney, I think there's some weeks I'd be saying that's really good value. This week, he's one of our sick candidates because he's been out of practice. There was rumors he could be starting on IR. He's a player a bit like Javonte Williams, where I'm not in this week, and he could well go on to make us look foolish saying sit him. There's some players you like to see something from before you take that gamble. And there is a good amount of the probability for Donovan he might not repay that. Drake London and Mike Pence. The reason I'm saving them is because we move on to my chosen stack of the week, which is Penix and London. Now we've said already.
Can I just stop you? You've not mentioned the biggest weapon on the Falcons' offense.
Who have I not
Kyle
mentioned?
Pitts.
Oh, sorry, no, I didn't mention Kyle. So
it's his year. Remember, it's going to be his year.
Think 2,600. It's a hell of a done. Anyway, moving on from Kyle Pitts.
Let's get back to the stat.
Yeah, so I'd actually written him down. Right, this is how far Kyle Pitts has come. I've got him written in my notes, and I forgot to talk about him. That's how much the sun has set on Kyle Pitts. Do you know what? Genuinely, though, I hope that does come back to, and I hope we see something great from Kyle Pitts this year. Back to my stack of the week, though. I said already, we've said Burrow Chase. That's what you want. There are some bigger names and bigger combinations that come with bigger price points. So for our stacks of the week, we're looking perhaps just below the obvious. We're not getting too cute with it, but something that maybe not everyone's doing, that if it pulls off for you, and all you need in DFS is one thing. If in this situation, all you need is Mike Penix and Drake London to have a couple of great connections for touchdowns, and this pays off for you, and it's a really good price. I just think the game climate, where you're looking at 47.5 as the line, books are only 2-point favourites. This has got potential for a shootout. Obviously, it's a little bit of wait and see for Mike Penix. We didn't see enough last year. But this is certainly a stack I'm going to look to work in, and saves me a bit of money maybe to pay up in a couple of other spots as well. What do you think of my stack of the week, Ed?
Yeah, agreed. I think that's the thing. When you're picking a stack like this, it could save you the money to have someone like Bijan or Jamar Chase as your captain. So I think that's really good value there.
Your stack of the week is one that I really liked mine as being a bit more value until you told me yours, and then I sort of changed my mind a bit. And I thought, actually, I really like yours as well. So your stack of the week, Ed?
Yeah, so it's a bit pricier than Penix and Drake London, 12,800 for Fantasy Gameday. But I think surely they've got a clearer route to a bigger score. Of course, there are question marks over T-Law after last season, but they're playing the Panthers. We discussed their defense in the main show. It's expected to be improved this year, especially their rush defense, but there are still serious question marks over their pass defense. Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, what can we say? He was so consistent last season. He had 11 weeks over 14.5 fantasy points and an amazing rookie season. And it will be fascinating to see how he and Trevor Lawrence combine this year. But I think this might unlock a bit of value elsewhere in your team. And it's certainly a stack that I'm going to look to work into a team or two this week.
And I think the thing is with both of our stacks, there is a route where we wouldn't be shocked if London or Thomas caught a couple of touchdown passes, in which case you're then laughing with that on your roster, aren't you?
Indeed.
So before we move on, please do, if you're going to have a go on Fantasy Game Day this week and you have not done before, use the promo code THFF1. That'll get you one free play with your first paid entry. And obviously, if you're using DraftKings as well over in the US, we've got those prices up there. Sometimes the pricing doesn't quite match up in the same way as about Fantasy Game Day, but the game script, the player combinations, it's all still relevant. Obviously, we talk about the exact same game. One nuance of Fantasy Game Day, Ed, is we have the captain pick. And we both agreed on one captain. We were going to have a captain pick each. And then we both thought, actually, there's one clear-cut person for us. And that was Christian McCaffrey. And then we're coming off the back of the news that he is nursing a calf injury. We've both said we're not hugely worried about that at this point until we've had more information. And there are other players that might sit out or be limited on a Thursday and Friday. And it doesn't mean a great deal when it comes to game time, especially for veterans. So all of this is, if the injury doesn't turn out to be a shocker dependent, why does CMC appeal as a captain pick after the obvious players above?
That's right. Yeah, a reminder that captain with Fantasy Game Day, you have Sunday Stars where you get a captain pick who scores double points. If you don't like that, you can still play the classic version of the game without the double points. So with a captain, you're looking for someone who's guaranteed to get you big points. So it's probably going to be your most expensive player because they're going to be the ones who are more likely to get big points. So, I mean, there are obvious picks here. Jamar Chase, excuse me, Bijan. But I suppose the way to go different this week is fairly obvious in it being CMC. So maybe it won't end up being different. The 49ers projected to score 25 points. And CMC, if he plays, will easily make up a fair proportion of that. Of course, we've got to be worried of the injury when it comes to CMC after what he's been through the last few years. So keep a close eye on that. But I just think, Purdy will use one of his best weapons as much as he possibly can. So I think at 6,600, I think that is good value for CMC. I don't think you'll get much better value than that going forward. If he starts to hit form, he will be obscenely expensive.
And he's not extortionate on DraftKings either. This is a potential to sound a bit stupid, but there's part of me that thinks with the injury news, if he's playing, I'm more inclined to captain him because some people will stay away from him because of the injury news. And if he's setting a few lineups, if you're having a couple of teams enter into that, that's the sort of gamble that can pay off. Once again, you're doing this in a vacuum. It's 1 week. It doesn't matter what happens over a longer period of time at all. If you get that call right, you get that gamble right just one time, it can pay off. So, yeah, I appreciate why it might sound a bit daft, but actually the injury news, if he suits up, makes him appeal to me a little bit more bizarrely. What we did was then we thought, right, in case CMC is out, we need a bit of a backup player. And I'm going back to a player that Ed has already mentioned, and that is Brian Thomas. It's decent value selection out of those top price players. It's slightly more expensive than CMC, obviously. But considering the savings you're getting of the players that are above a wide receiver, for the player that projects to be wide receiver 4 in the week and overall player 10 when it comes to pointing for all eligible players in the captain spot, that is sort of the sweet spot for me for taking the gamble of someone that not everyone might be using and also free up a little bit of money. We spoke on our main show. Jags defense were awful in every metric possible for fantasy last year.
Jags defense weren't great. But,
they were, yeah. Panthers defense, thank you for correcting. So Panthers defense weren't great at all. And we spoke about that's why we're in on Trevor Lawrence this week. Why obviously we're in on Brian Thomas. Why we're also maybe a little bit in on Travis Etienne, although that is risky this week. But there is a chance Brian Thomas could absolutely feast on Sunday. And that's why I quite like the idea of putting him in and getting those double points when people might be trying to work on players that are a little bit higher at the price points there. So, yeah, we know there are obvious players. We know there are players perhaps you would rather have. But if you're wanting to try something a little bit different, they are a couple of players for us. And remember, if you've not played before, head over there, type in THFF1 for your discount code, and also give us a subscribe, a like, and a share as well. Next up is a feature that I reckon was about 50-50 working for us last year, and that is our bargain basket pick. So basically, a player that is incredibly cheap, that there is a route to them getting decent points. No, we're not going to find a player that is dirt cheap and is going to be the superstar on the week, but a player that can get really repay that and help you to spend up elsewhere. This week, I couldn't, once I saw the price of this player, a player we have banged on about constantly already, Emma Booker at 3,200 and 4,600 on DraftKings. I'm assuming is going to be candidate for being the most heavily rostered player on every single DFS slate this week. So it's then a case of, do you have to get different to get ahead, or do you have to go with the obvious pick? Because obvious for a reason, you're missing out if you don't. Am I oversimplifying this? Said 3,000 for Ibuka. Is there anything more to think about than yes, please?
I feel like you say, unless you're trying to be quirky, I don't see many lineups without him, to be honest. Because if he performs as we expect him to perform, and you mentioned there about Baker loving him as we've talked about, surely his price is only going to go up and up. So I don't think he'll be this cheap going forward.
I think Baker Mayfield loves him almost as much as we do at this point. It just seems like great. And to be honest, I will probably in one of the cheaper games, just see how it turns out. I might go for the triple stack of Baker, Evans, and Egbuka, because what else you can get from 3,200 anywhere else? There is a world where we spoke about Egbuka for the last few weeks, like he is the second coming, and he just isn't it. At the minute, what we're seeing and hearing, that seems unlikely. I'm fairly confident this isn't too hot to take, that this is the cheapest he will ever be until the last year of his career if he massively drops off. I just don't see him ever being this cheap again. Speaking of cheaphead, we move on to, once again, a feature that bizarrely worked out quite well for me last year on a couple of occasions, and that is the secret stack. Now, this is called the secret stack, as you can see by the players on the screen there, not because you're not telling anyone, because you found this magical thing that's going to work out wonderfully and you don't want the people to do it. It's a secret stack because you don't tell anybody you select this lineup unless it works out for you, because it sounds stupid.
Yeah, it makes you seem like you don't have a clue.
And last year, the first time we did the secret stack, I can remember you chuckling at me when I was all in on Danny Dimes and Malik Neighbours. And that was the best I ever did on Fantasy Game Day. Everything clicked. It was wonderful. And I just hit it right. I tried the same with Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. a couple times. Didn't quite work out. But this week, I'm going for Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren, purely because who else is Danny Dimes going to pass to? Like, realistically, where else is the ball going? I just think that it gives you so much room to maneuver. If this works out to a good level, whoever you might be able to then plug in as an expensive player at your captain, maybe a second expensive option at running back or wide receiver, if they simply repay and then some on their value, am I saying these are going to be a top 5 stack when you put everyone together in the week? Absolutely not. We're just saying they could do enough that your freed up cash elsewhere kind of is really, really useful there. So Daniel Jones, 4,200 on Fantasy Games, High on 2,800. Touchdown, good handful of receptions, a little bit of rushing work from Danny Dimes. It has the potential to give you good return and do wonders for your team elsewhere. Hands up, it has the potential for us to look back on this week and go, yeah, we won't talk about that because that got me 7 points.
Plus, the Colts have got the Dolphins, who haven't got, haven't got the best defense. So I think that's another tick in the box of this. I mean, the thing is with Secret Stack is, more often than not, it's not going to work. Hence why the prices are so low. But it does give you that maneuverability. I mean, look, the combined price of 7,000, cheaper than Brian Thomas Jr. And it gives you a hell of a lot of maneuverability elsewhere. But yeah, I can see a route to this being successful, and I'm sure you'll remind us next week if it is successful.
This is the problem though with the secret stack. If you do a secret stack and you're not putting it for everyone to see, you don't have to tell anyone when it's gone wrong. Just that didn't happen. If once something like this goes right, once, and I say you don't look a genius because you probably get it wrong 9 times, but it's one of those that is worth plugging in every now and then just to kind of get, and it's a bit of fun. That adds to the excitement of the game. And do you know what? Gives me a reason to actually care what's happening in the Colts Dolphins game more than anything. And you're right, the Dolphins defense is so changed. It's a bit to be confirmed, isn't it? It should be improved. We'll find out if it is. I mean, if Danny Dimes does a number on him, there'll be concerns in Miami, certainly. So that brings us to the end of our DFS Red Hot picks with those values for Fantasy Game Day and for DraftKings for our US viewers. Remember, if you are playing here in the UK on Fantasy Game Day app, use that promo code THFF, TH Fantasy Football, or 1 to get your 1 free play with your first paid entry. And we'll be back next week to look at our week 2 slate and celebrate the genius of plugging in Danny Dimes and Tyler Warren to win you some cash money. That's all from me, Ed. You got anything further to add?
No, just good luck this weekend, everyone.
So that's it from us. Malcolm, take us home, baby.
You have been listening to the team from TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Twitter and Instagram.